Imagine a force in the global economy so incredibly powerful and so vast that it quietly shapes the very world around you, yet it remains almost entirely invisible to the average person. Well, today, we are officially opening the file on the ultimate financial mystery. In this explainer, we're going to investigate a single, super secretive entity that basically holds the keys to the modern world. We'll trace its trail all the way from the neon-lit greed of 1980s Wall Street right down to the quiet, algorithmic takeover of the American suburb. So, buckle up, prepare to see the world's money in a completely different light.
If I were to ask you, right now, who controls the global economy? Who holds the most money? What actually comes to mind? You'd probably think of the massive tech giants, right? Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Or maybe you're thinking of the big oil barons like Saudi Aramco. But here's the thing, the correct answer isn't actually on that list. And honestly, that's exactly how they want it. Because real money, the kind of money that literally dictates global policy, well, it loves silence. This entity doesn't really want you to know how they've quietly amassed power over practically everything.
Okay, let's dive into this. $12.5 trillion. That is the staggeringly massive amount of assets currently under the management of a company called BlackRock. Let that sink in. That number is so large, it practically breaks the human brain just trying to comprehend it. We're talking about a level of wealth that entirely transcends ordinary corporations and literally rivals the GDP of major global nations. But to really grasp what a number like this actually means in reality, we have to break it down.
Let's start with part one, the trillion-dollar shadow. To put this completely incomprehensible wealth into a perspective we can actually visualize, imagine you decided to spend this money. And to make it quick, you're going to spend $3 million every single day. To even make a dent in this fortune, you would have had to start your shopping spree way back when the very first pyramids were being built in ancient Egypt. You'd be spending $3 million a day through antiquity, through the Middle Ages, the World Wars, all the way to 2025. And get this, you would still have more than half of the money left over. No way, right? And the mastermind behind this astronomical wealth isn't some eccentric billionaire launching rockets into space. It's a quiet, nearly invisible man in rimless glasses named Larry Fink. Which brings us to part two, the 100 million mistake. To really understand Larry Fink's empire, we have to travel back in time to the neon-drenched, champagne-soaked streets of New York in the 1980s. Back then, Fink was this young, brilliant pioneer dealing in mortgage-backed securities. He was an absolute rock star at his investment bank, making them hundreds of millions of dollars. He firmly believed his mathematical models could predict just about anything. But then, in 1986, the market did the completely unthinkable. Interest rates, which his brilliant models said would fall, went up instead. In a single moment, Fink's department lost $100 million. Just like that, the golden boy became a toxic outcast overnight. He was humiliated, and he swore to himself he would never, ever be in that position again.
Driven by the trauma of that massive 1986 loss, Fink totally abandoned the pursuit of sheer profit. Instead, he became obsessed with calculating and eliminating risk. In 1988, he pitched this deeply cautious, risk-first strategy to Stephen Schwarzman, forming a brand new division under the Blackstone umbrella. Now, the partnership was incredibly lucrative, but their core philosophies seriously clashed. By 1994, Fink led a bitter split, buying out his team's independence to form his own absolute fortress against financial chaos. He named it BlackRock.
The real secret weapon BlackRock used to absolutely conquer the market was a proprietary engine called Aladdin. Now, this isn't a cartoon character, okay? It's a hyper-advanced risk analysis engine. In the 90s, when corporate giants like General Electric had portfolios totally filled with toxic, unreadable assets, Fink's team didn't just offer to buy them up on the cheap. They used Aladdin to run literally millions of future scenarios, things like global oil shocks or sudden bankruptcies, to provide a perfect, clear diagnosis of the risk. It was essentially a financial crystal ball, and it made BlackRock the most trusted name on Wall Street.
Let's move on to part three, the 2008 financial salad. So the crucial point here is investigating the catastrophic housing bubble of the 2000s, a crisis built, ironically enough, on the very securities Fink helped invent. Think of it like a salad. A good, solid mortgage is your fresh lettuce. It's reliable, it's healthy. But then banks started giving out ninja loans to people with no income, no job, and no assets. These are your spoiled, rotten leftovers. But instead of throwing them out, Wall Street mixed the rotten ingredients right in with the fresh ones, tossed it all together, and completely smothered it in a thick dressing of high-rating bonds.
This toxic concoction was called a CDO, a collateralized debt obligation, and the whole world bought it up thinking it was a perfectly healthy investment.
When that rotten salad finally made the entire global economy violently ill in 2008, the banking system was staring into the abyss. The US government was completely desperate. They needed a doctor who could look deep inside this toxic mess and somehow find a cure. During the peak of the crisis, the US Treasury called Larry Fink 49 times. They ended up giving BlackRock's Aladdin algorithm unprecedented, deep-level access to the dirty laundry of basically every failing financial giant out there. BlackRock essentially became the shadow architect of the entire global bailout. Because of this, BlackRock emerged from the ashes of 2008 stronger than they ever were before. They realized people were now absolutely terrified of risk, so they capitalized on a truly brilliant concept, the ETF, or Exchange Traded Fund. Think of it this way. Instead of trying to guess if Apple or Microsoft is going to be the winning stock, which is kind of like picking a single product, an ETF lets you buy the entire supermarket shelf all at once. This is called passive investing. BlackRock smartly bought the massive ETF brand iShares during the crisis, perfectly positioning themselves to absorb the money of a terrified market.
And that sets up part 4 perfectly, the illusion of choice.
And this brilliantly illustrates how passive investing quietly handed BlackRock the keys to the entire corporate world. We all like to think we have free market competition, right? Coca-Cola fights Pepsi tooth and nail. But if you look at the top shareholders for Coca-Cola, and then turn around and look at the top shareholders for Pepsi, you are going to see the exact same names, the big three: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Through passive ETF investing, they own the largest stakes in almost every competing company on Earth. The fierce competition we see, it's really just an illusion.
Because they own a piece of almost everything. The big three control an average of 22% of the voting power in the entire S&P 500. This effectively turns them into a quiet cartel. CEOs know better than to start aggressive price wars with their rivals because, well, their biggest shareholders own the rival too. It really stifles true innovation. If these three entities decide they don't like a CEO or if they want a company to completely change its strategy, they have the combined voting power to just force it to happen overnight.
Now, let's open up part 5, the new feudalism. But you see, their influence isn't just limited to corporate boardrooms. Post-2008, this Wall Street machinery began devouring the American dream right in our very own neighborhoods. Following the housing crash, millions of people lost their homes. Wall Street funds, heavily backed by BlackRock and others, looked at this and saw a massively undervalued asset. Here is their ruthless 4-step playbook. Step 1. Buy single-family homes en masse, easily outbidding regular families with all-cash offers generated by algorithms. Step 2. Do the absolute cheapest renovations possible. Step 3. Rent them out and just constantly hike up the rent and add on junk fees. And Step 4. Package those lease payments into brand new financial securities to sell globally. It's literally the 2008 scheme all over again, just perfected.
The ultimate result? A completely destroyed social mobility ladder. Listen to this chilling quote from BlackRock's co-founder and Fink's right-hand man, Robert Capito, when talking about inflation and the modern economy. He said, "For the first time, this generation is going to go into a store and not be able to get what they want, get used to living in deficit." It's a stark reality. We are really seeing the rise of a new kind of feudalism, where financial clerks are essentially acting as medieval lords. They own the land, while a whole generation is trapped living as permanent renters.
Which takes us to our final major file, Part 6, the ESG Empire.
Let's move on and see how this builds. Having bought up so much of the world's assets and homes, Larry Fink set his sights on something even bigger, the world's conscience. Every single year, Fink writes a highly anticipated letter to global CEOs. He began weaponizing a framework known as ESG. E is for environmental impact, S is for social responsibility, and G is for corporate governance. Fink basically decreed that companies absolutely must comply with these metrics, whether that means lowering their carbon emissions or changing up their board diversity or face BlackRock actively voting against their management. He essentially created his own private penal code for global business.
But, as you might guess, wielding this kind of unilateral, unelected power made him a target from basically all sides. Just impartially looking at the political landscape, the left wing heavily criticizes BlackRock as a hypocritical sponsor of climate chaos because they still continue to invest heavily in fossil fuels while preaching about green energy. On the flip side, the right wing intensely criticizes Fink for enforcing a liberal agenda, accusing him of basically weaponizing regular pensioners' money to force social policies that entirely bypass the democratic process. Yet, even with all of this massive political crossfire and serious accusations of hypocrisy for expanding into controversial markets like China, This silent machine just kept growing, unchecked. From $1 trillion back in 2006, skyrocketing up to $8 trillion by 2020, and surging to that staggering $12.5 trillion today. Activists can shout, politicians can launch investigations, but the algorithms just keep calculating, the passive funds keep absorbing capital, and BlackRock's shadow simply continues to lengthen across the globe.
So, what does this all mean for us? It leaves us with one incredibly haunting question to conclude our explainer today. What actually happens when the ultimate risk management machine encounters a black swan? You know, a completely unprecedented, unprogrammable event. Back in 2010, a lone trader sitting in his pajamas caused a $1 trillion algorithmic flash crash in just 5 minutes. Today, our entire global economy basically relies on the Aladdin system and this massive passive investing monopoly. If a virus hits the data, or if the algorithm makes one catastrophic error, the resulting panic isn't going to take months to unfold like it did in 2008. It will take milliseconds. The very machine built to completely eliminate risk might just be the absolute biggest risk we've ever faced. Until next time, keep questioning what's hiding in the shadows.